It had been raining for days in the village of Wythorn. Not the kind of gentle mist that sometimes kissed the fields, but a cold, steady downpour that soaked through bone and soil alike. The sky was a colorless smear, the roads turned to soup, and the chimneys smoked low, the scent of wet wood and mildew clinging to every corner. They said the rain had started the day after Elric, the village miller, vanished. He was last seen trudging through the woods at dusk, a burlap sack over his shoulder, heading toward the edge of the vale where the trees grew too dense for light to settle. No one asked why. Elric kept to himself. A widower, soft-spoken, hands always coated in flour, eyes always watching the sky. By the third day of rain, the village well turned strange. The water came up dark, with a bitter aftertaste no one could quite name. Livestock refused to drink it. Some villagers began hauling buckets from the stream instead, until a goat was found dead along the banks, its tongue gray and eyes wide open, as if startled by something no one could see. On the fifth day, Father Merrin called for prayer beneath the sagging roof of the chapel. Candles flickered in protest against the damp, and the stone walls wept with condensation. He spoke of sin, of curses, of nature's rebellion. But the villagers listened with only half their hearts. Their minds wandered, all recalling what Elric had said not a month before, seated outside his mill. This land wasn't always ours, he had muttered, watching the clouds gather. Some things were buried too shallow. The elders dismissed it as grief-addled rambling, the result of too much solitude. But the younger folk remembered the old trail that wound past the hollow tree, the one Elric had followed the night he vanished. It was overgrown now, nearly swallowed by moss and thyme. Most avoided it, saying the air there felt wrong, like a breath half held. By the seventh day, the rain had begun to sound different. Not louder, exactly, but deeper. Heavier. As though it fell through more than just air. Some claimed to hear faint music in it, low notes, as if sung through reeds or bone. One child awoke screaming, saying a voice had whispered through her window, asking if she remembered the old name for the moon. No one had taught her that. The baker's wife, Hilda, dreamt of a tower that stood beneath the earth, its halls filled with water and mirrors that showed people who had never lived. She awoke with wet hair, though her bed was dry. That night, a group of men lit lanterns and decided to follow Elric's path into the woods. They tied twine from tree to guide their way back. Only two returned before dawn, silent, pale, and shivering. One of them, Tomas, had a burn on his wrist in the shape of an open eye. The other refused to speak at all, save for one thing he whispered while staring into his empty hands. "We weren't supposed to see it." No one asked what it was. By the 10th day, silence settled like a second skin. The rain still fell, but no one spoke of it anymore. The well had been boarded up. The stream avoided. The chapel locked. People kept to their homes, their hearths barely warm, their windows covered in thick cloth. Chickens stopped laying. Dogs howled at nothing and then stopped barking entirely. Then, just as it had begun, the rain ended. The morning light revealed a village quiet but untouched. The mud had dried to a thick crust. The trees stood still. And yet, things were not as they had been. The birds did not return. The leaves no longer rustled. And in the center of the square, where children once played, a perfect circle of moss had grown overnight, lush, green, and steaming slightly in the morning air. The twine that had guided the men into the woods? It now hung like a web over the chapel door, knotted in strange, unreadable patterns. Some said it spelled a warning. Others claimed it was a map. Most chose not to look too closely. No one spoke of Elric again. But in the quiet that followed the rain, when the wind passed low across the rooftops, some said they could hear footsteps on wet stone, never hurried, never loud. Just steady. As if someone was still walking, searching, trying to remember the way back. And on certain nights, when the moon sat low and heavy behind the trees, the moss in the square would glow faintly. Like something alive. Like something waiting.